Okay, well then, in that tone, I'll introduce you to Rebellion to Resilience. So the idea is this. The rebellion's bloody amazing and has to work. But even if it worked in the next 5 minutes, climate breakdown is inevitable to some extent, without a doubt. So this panel is looking at propping up the rebellion and being part of the rebellion, but also putting time into how communities start to become resilient to the inevitable effects of climate breakdown. And so we're looking at 2 different areas that work in that field already. So one area is this incredible phenomenon that's been happening globally, which is the shittiest name for a revolution I've ever heard in my life, right? New municipalism, okay? That's got to be the crappiest name for a revolution ever, right? But it is revolutionary in the sense that every continent in this world at the moment has grassroots groups of people who come together and organize themselves and put in their own people in positions of power in local communities or in towns and cities. So famously in Spain, we had Ada Colau, the mayoress of Barcelona, and Manuela Carmena, the mayoress of Madrid. And they held an event in Barcelona in 2017 called Fearless Cities. And that's the first time that people from around the world who are doing this came together. That included people from, what's it called, Cooperative Jackson, Mississippi. Do you know about them? Right, check this out. So this guy comes out, it's a huge man of colour, bald man, he's massive. And he says, ladies and gentlemen, I come from the most racist state in America, Mississippi. And not only that, but I come from the most racist city in the most racist state, Jackson. And guess what? I'm the mayor. It's a fantastic moment, right? And basically, they're a great example. They're really worth looking into, all right? Cooperative Jackson, Mississippi. And basically they self-organised a grassroots movement, and you put your people in as mayor, you put your people in as councillors, and you start to reclaim power from the inside of the system, okay? So part of this panel has 2 people from that world, all right? So one of them is my friend here, Peter McFadden from Frome, who in 2011, they started doing that. He was bloody mayor of Frome, which is amazing. And in fact, out of 17 councillors, all of them are part of his independence for Frome. He didn't do it on his own. He had some people helping him. And my friend here, Kay Korf, is from Torridge Common Ground. She lives down here. And we set up a similar thing. And it's unbelievable because we put in 10 candidates at the local election. 9 of them got in, man, and it completely pissed off the council, you know. And now the Tories don't have a complete sway of power in the local council, but it told us something. People are really, really ready to accept the fact that power as we know it is broken. So we need to reclaim power for ourselves, all right? Because we've got the votes. On my left is the other side of what resilience could look like, okay? What are we going to do? Climate breakdown is inevitable. We're looking at food distribution networks breaking down within 2 to 3 years. What do you do? What do you do when you wake up and the ATMs have run out of cash? What do you do when you wake up and food prices have tripled overnight? What do you do when there's a lack of medical supplies? What you do is you start to think about this now and begin to be resilient and look at what kind of different technologies or areas that we can work in to make ourselves resilient in a local way. So, Guy, your surname is Coxall, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. To my left is Guy Coxall. He is hemp man in my head. Basically, he turned up here not long ago working with us here in Tapley, looking at growing loads and loads of hemp. Because the fact is that hemp has these incredible properties. It's incredibly easy to grow. I had no idea what it could do, and he's going to tell you. Okay? But on top of that, okay, Niels, how do you say your surname?
Caulfield.
Yeah. On top of that is Niels Caulfield, to my far left. Niels Caulfield, an absolute expert on regenerative agriculture. We're going to have to change the way that we live with each other, the way we live with each other in communities, and change the way we live with our dwindling resources and become resilient. Now, my aim for this is that we start to message, through Extinction Rebellion, an interesting turn of events. It may well be that going to carbon zero by 2025 means you have to give up stuff. I'm sorry, you ain't flying to Torremolinos anymore, okay? You're not going to have Parma ham whenever you want it, and you're not going to eat out-of-season bloody kiwis. But, the second biggest killer in this country is loneliness, all right? Well, that will go, because we're not going to survive unless communities come back together again. Okay, your diets aren't going to be that super rich and weird where you're having Chinese one night, you're having pizzas the next night. It's very carcinogenic. All these ingredients are really screwing us up. Your diets will become very simple because it will be local food from 10 to 20 miles max. But that means you're suddenly eating seasonally again. That's what our bodies are built for. We're still on the savannah. Okay, we're meant to be eating seasonally, food that grows locally, not, Thai one night. And Thai food's great, by the way, but, it changes your diet. But I'm saying it's not a bad thing. One guy I tried to get for this panel, but he wasn't able to make it down. He was on the front page of the Daily Mirror 3 months ago. If we move to carbon zero, people will only be able to work 9 hours a week. Can you imagine how popular that is? If you're working with Extinction Rebellion and you're trying to get people on board, that's a killer line. That's a killer line. And it goes on. So what I'm getting at is perhaps by the end of this panel, God, you notice how calm you made me. It's fantastic. I've never known me like this, darling. By the end of the panel, perhaps we can open up on the thought that, it might be a better life in some ways than the one we're trapped in now. Yeah. Cool. So I'm going to ask each of these fabulous people to just give you a little 5-minute glimpse into the wonderful world of how they fit into this panel. Everyone okay? Yeah, cool. God, it's a bloody, look at that. Can you feel it? Revolution!
We're working up again.
Yeah. There you go. Enough of that quietness. Yes. My full name, Jamie Kelsey Fry. There you go. Contributing editor, New Internationalist. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, my real dear friend Kay Korff, who's, Councillor Kay Korff.
Hello. All right. So, where are we now? We're September 2019. This time last year, I had no idea I'd be a councillor a year later. I was part of the following for many, many years, and what I refer to as the following is quite often we hear lots of people around us, family, friends, the community say, oh, I take no notice of politics, I can't get into politics, what do they do for us? We're not like them. And sadly, that following then creates a smokescreen, doesn't it? And another barrier to people, normal people like us, people in our community, putting themselves forward and being part of the council, being part of the politics. So back in March last year, I went to one of Torridge Common Ground's People's Assemblies, and I just went, I'll be honest with you, for something to do. There was stuff for the kids to do, it looked a bit interesting, and I turned up and I was absolutely blown away, and I was like, my God, this is where I fit in. I'm not going to be part of the following anymore. And actually, I'm going to create a new following, a following that encourages people and shows people that, we can infiltrate the system. And infiltrating the system from the, I don't want to say bottom, but it is, from the lower level of politics all the way up. And I've made a few notes. So basically, one of the first things that I noticed within the town council was all these traditions. So being smart, when you go to a council meeting, we had to wear robes and it felt like I was in Harry Potter. I come from the Midlands and I come from, working class people and, from a background of tradition. And sometimes tradition is good, but actually traditions, what are traditions? Reminiscence about the past, about how it used to be. And like Jamie said, we've got to change. We can't do what we've been doing. And again, I think tradition is a smokescreen for holding us back. Sorry. Basically, my 9 till 5 job is working with homeless people. I work with the underdog. I work with people in complete and utter crisis. And these people are experiencing everything that's wrong within our community and within our system. But unfortunately, these people don't get heard. And they don't get a voice. And, at the moment, there's so many people that haven't got the strength or the ability to put themselves forward to tell everybody and to tell the top dogs what is going on and to try and make changes. And as scary as it is, and trust me, it has been bloody scary, that's what I'm doing. I'm putting myself forward. And I've been looking all around me and to try and get things that are inspirational for people. And I just want to shout out a few names. Alexandra Cortez, Omar Minnesota, Rashida Tlaib, Anya Presley, the 4 congresswomen in America that put themselves forward, ordinary working class women that knew that things needed to change and to do it for their community. No one in a million years thought that they would get elected, and they did. We need to show people that we care. And all of this feeds into XR because we are trying to show people what will change and how we can change it to avoid extinction. We've got to get on the same level as our community and show them love. Sorry. Basically, what I want to say is, not in a million years did I think I would be able to be in a position and that I'd got the ability to be in town council and to try and make a change for our community. And it's early days, I'm only 4 months in, and I'm still learning about public speaking and sort of putting myself out there, but I care. I really, really care. So if any of you are thinking that you'd like to get into town council, my name's Kay Korf, Kay Morris on Facebook. Stop me today, get my number, get my details, and let's talk. And just to end, sorry if I talk too much, one of the traditions in the council is every 4 years someone becomes elected as mayor, the first citizen of the community. Another thing surrounded in tradition, and in the mayor's introduction you've got these VIP guests sitting on the left, and I want to be mayor because I don't want those VIP guests sitting on the left. I want normal people in the community, the homeless people that I've worked with, to say that, they can be part of that and they don't need to be left out at the sidelines. And so many people say the only people that get a chance of being mayor is those that are retired, middle class, loads of money in the bank, self-employed. I work full time, I've got 2 small children there. It's tiring, but I want to be mayor. One, because I want to show them a different way and walk in wearing harem trousers. And 2, because, there's not many women in any level of politics, particularly low-level politics. And we're strong, we give birth. And yeah, so thank you.
Whoa. Councillor Kay Korf, Torridge Common Ground, come on. We'll keep you informed about the mayoral election campaign. And we're going to fill those benches with the people in hidden poverty, the people who are homeless, the refugees who are living in Atlantic Village, not with the dignitaries and the VIPs. Good idea, right? Yeah. Thanks, darling.
How would you not vote for Kay? Bloody hell. I have to say that's completely unfair not running this line in the other direction because, that's amazing. Thank you so much. I came to this too because in it differently, and obviously you can probably tell from my accent from a different class and a different background. But I didn't expect to get elected. I was with a bunch of people in the pub moaning about our local politics because I'd come to this through green and environmental stuff, and I'd been to. I went to the council and asked them about their environmental policy, by which I meant talk to me about climate change and peak oil, and they said we've got a park. And I said, no, I mean climate change. And they said, we've got a park. That is the level of our ambition. And that's what I was moaning about. And then I met a bunch of people, and we never really meant to get elected. This is in 2011. And 10 out of 17 of us got elected, and suddenly found ourselves running Frome. And like you, there's that whole coming without knowing stuff is such an advantage, because we were constantly saying why, or so why do we do that? And usually the answer was because we always have, or because there's a book called, you can probably remind me, what are the rules called?
Standing orders.
The Standing Orders, thank you. There's a bloody great big fat book of what are effectively the rules, but they're not the rules. But there are some things you have to do, like have audits and stuff, which makes sense. But most of it is just guidance. It's sort of like, we suggest that you have a row of men in suits. No, they don't say that. They say, we suggest that you have, a row of, all that nonsense of standing up and the things like your robes. I mean, what a lot of bollocks that is, honestly. So I came to this by accident too. And I mean, I wasn't going to say, Kay said a lot of what I wanted to, which is brilliant. I think that we have to do things at a local level for all sorts of reasons, which we'll come on to in our discussion. I mean, it's clearly national politics is a complete and utter farce, but there's a real problem because it filters down to a local level. So in larger towns, anyway, people are still elected by their party politics. And so what we had Tories and Lib Dems who just fought each other. I mean, so they had constant conflict. So they didn't actually do anything because they were constantly opposing each other and doing things by party, by party ideology, which is a total nonsense. And what we saw was an opportunity to change all that, but we also saw austerity coming, and very clearly that if we didn't do it, no one else was going to. So I'm sure where most of you live, it's the same, but we've had sort of 40% year-on-year cuts of the two layers above us. So there's nothing for the arts, for mental health, for all of these things. So youth, exactly. So if we didn't do it, it wasn't going to happen. So we had to find a way of building a more joined up, but also a much more ambitious and coherent council. And one of the things that we found was a complete myth is this fact that if you put the taxes up, no one will vote for you and everyone will, I don't know what they'll do, but because you've got 4 years to do it anyway. We put the taxes up all the way through, we borrowed, we spent, other councils have done it even more, putting up their taxes, 100% sometimes. Because we're not talking about, at the back there, Mr. Buckfastly, 89%. What's that look? Yeah. 97%. Any advance on 97%? No, because actually at this level you can raise your taxes. You're not capped. But I mean, we're talking about small amounts of money. But with that, you can bring in a lot more. And what we did particularly was we brought in a professional fundraiser. We multiplied the amount of money going back out to the voluntary sector by 10. And then brought in a professional fundraiser and employed staff to help all of those organisations. So basically saying, we've got to strengthen the community. You can't have a little council that's sat there that people come and moan to. I mean, most people don't even know the council exists. But those who do know that it exists moan to it. And we have to change that so that it becomes, the council is something that is there to facilitate what the people want. So that's what we did for 4 years. I wrote that up as this Flat Pack Democracy, which became, has led me to all sorts of places, including down here and to Jamie, I guess. That's probably how we met. And it's been helpful in giving ideas to other people. And Flat Pack 2's out on Monday, tomorrow, no less, which is what happened next. Full of tales and confessions, because it's not all been easy by any means. So one of the things that we did which really links into us being here is about 6 years ago we employed a resilience manager. One of the things we saw, I guess particularly me, but others, there were 4 of us who'd come from the transitions movement who saw climate change on the, tearing up the highway. Arriving fast. And so we employed a resilience manager, and she's been absolutely fantastic at helping projects to happen and bringing in way more money. Sold to the people as clean and healthy. How can you vote against that? Thanks. So we've really, really pushed that side, and we'll continue to do that. We declared a climate emergency very early on, and had carbon targets, and there's a whole lot of that stuff which I'm very happy to talk about later, or to talk to you about outside of here. Because I think it's definitely where all of this stuff has to go. And a lot of the independent councils, there's about 20 councils now that I know of, and there's probably a lot more that I don't, that are run in a similar way to Froome, with a bunch of independents working together with an ethos that holds them together. And then there's another 80 that I know of, like Kay's, where there are some councillors involved. So my real hope is that this kind of becomes a movement, and spreads out with people taking power in this way, because we desperately need to see a massive change in the way we do things. Thank you.
That's Peter McFadden. Product placement.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to move over to the other half of the story in a moment, but just to dwell on this, can the people in the room who are already doing this, who are councillors, just give a little wave? Yeah, exactly. We've got there. So, Councillor Carl Hawkins is District Councillor and Town Councillor. Carl Hawkins from Torridge Common Ground. Mr. Lawrence Shelley, ladies and gentlemen. Put a little hand up, Lawrence. Town Councillor for Torridge Common Ground. Daniel Bell, Town Councillor for Torridge Common Ground. What's your name, sir?
Andy Stokes.
Butt Fossley, Andy Stokes. So there's two groups here being represented. As Peter said, there's about 80 to 90 groups like this around the country and around the world. It's also really big. Yeah. So I was going to share one story with you from Spain about exactly how this works, because it's changing the way that power is done, the way that the culture of power is done. And the phrase they have over in Spain is the feminisation of politics. All right, and I was interested in that phrase, and I said, is it just, it's getting more women in power? They said, well, no, it's much more than that. It's getting women in power who then change the way power is done. So I was saying, well, what does that look like? And when I worked a lot with them, and the Indignados, the 15M movement, it's all part of this movement of the squares. Wayne's here, everybody. Hide your food. Look, he's not interested in anything except his belly. Okay, so I was over in Spain. I was asking, what does it look like, the feminisation of politics? And Bernardo said, he's very friendly, don't worry. He's just interested in food and nothing else. Sorry, forget about Wayne. Everyone here? Good. All right, so check this out. What's the feminisation of politics look like? And Bernardo was saying, you know what, I've got the best answer because it only happened yesterday. Right, so Bernardo was taking minutes in a Madrid town hall meeting. Okay, Manuela Carmena, she's part of this movement. She's the mayoress of Madrid. The first thing that Manuela Carmena did, by the way, so we're talking about the town council building in the city of Madrid, the capital of Spain. She put a banner as high as this tent saying refugees welcome. First thing she did. Second thing she did, this whole council will never work with companies that are based in tax havens. Those were her first two decisions, man. You know what I'm talking about? This is how it rocks. But this is the example of feminisation of politics. I said, what does it look like? And Bernardo said, right, there's a big meeting, so all the meetings are in squares. And so there's a big meet in squares as he draws a circle. Fantastic. All the meetings are in circles, right? And they had this big meeting, and it was about what do we do about Uber, yeah? It was all blokes, pretty much all blokes, except for Manuela. And Bernardo's over there taking the minutes, right? And they go round, and all these men stand up and pontificate, just like I am, wagging their little finger, okay? What we should do, And Bernardo was saying they're all about third or fourth generation privileged families of Madrid, okay? The people have been in power for hundreds of years. And they went all the way round, and then they came to Manuela, and they were going, Mayoress, you're the only person who hasn't spoken. What do you think, right? And she said, this is in Bernardo's words, she said, the most magical words I've ever heard in politics. Because she stood up and she said, I don't know. And neither do any of you. You've all just stood up and pontificated with your little egos and your little connections. So I don't know, and I'm the only one who's able to be honest enough to say it. So we're not going to make any decisions until we have enough people coming in and we have a 360-degree understanding of the issue. Okay? I'm the mayor. That's how it's going. It's interesting, isn't it? It's a different way of doing it. So, there's a little story for you, a little anecdote. Now, the other half of this, communities taking back power, getting prepared for climate breakdown, bringing communities back together again. So what do we do when we've done that? What kind of ways can we start bringing about change so that our communities can be more resilient? So one of the really obvious things is that we have to look at a different way of growing crops that can be easily grown, that can be used for so many different things. One crop sticks out, folks, and it's hemp. All right? And this is Guy Coxall, brother Guy Coxall, who's waving his hemp at you right now. All right, over to you, brother. You're really welcome, man. It's really good.
Thank you. 5 years ago, I thought cannabis was just a recreational drug. and I've been astonished at what it can do. A friend of mine was selling CBD in Exeter, and I looked into it and didn't think much of it at first. Once I started researching it, I realised this CBD oil was magnificent. It helped with so many different things. So I got more involved, started manufacturing my own products. And then in 2016, the MHRA, who regulate medicines in the UK, tried to ban CBD across the UK. So a few of us got together and we set up something called the Cannabis Trades Association. We were able to sell it as a food supplement, and it's still going strong today. It's one of the biggest food supplements in the industry at the moment, and it's helping a hell of a lot of people. Last year, medical cannabis was legalised in the UK, which was a great thing. Unfortunately, doctors aren't prescribing it, and there's so many people desperately need it. But then I really got interested in the whole plant of hemp, and once I started looking into it, most people are concerned just with the flowers, which contains all the cannabinoids, but there's so much more to it. And what really interested me with it was the history of hemp. I mean, we've been growing hemp as an agricultural crop for over 10,000 years. It's one of the first agricultural crops we grew. In the UK, our navy depended on it. We used it for the ropes and sails. We wouldn't have circumnavigated the globe without it. And in the 1930s in America, unfortunately, it was the corporations which banned both cannabis and hemp under the guise of it being a psychoactive drug. It was nothing to do with THC or the psychoactive part of it. It was actually to do with the hemp industry, because at the time, hemp was the main competitor to the pharmaceutical industry, the oil industry, the cotton industry, and the paper industry for cutting down trees. And this is the problem we're facing. It's the corporations who have the monopoly, and they have the power over the governments. And I think one of the first things we need to do is make a law that politicians cannot get any financial benefit from corporations. That's one of the biggest things we can do. So, cannabis was made illegal in 1937. It was the Marijuana Tax Act. That moved through to the 1961 Drugs Convention, and hemp and cannabis was prohibited worldwide. Even today in the UK, we can only grow hemp for the stalk and the seed. The flowers and the leaves have to be destroyed on site because the Home Office consider it a Class B controlled substance, which is ironic because it contains less than 0.2% THC. You could smoke a whole field of that and not even get a smile. Of course, it would be good for you. So I set up something called Hemp Tank, which is the UK's think tank for the hemp industry, about 2 years ago, and it's coming on strong. There's quite a few organisations now in the UK working for the hemp industry, so we're trying to set up the infrastructure again for the UK hemp industry. It's so important. We can use this for so many things. We can create carbon negative housing. We can power those houses using hemp batteries. This is a hemp battery, but we'll probably go into this more in the questions, I think. Bioplastics, which is compostable, made from hemp. There's so many different uses. So really, what I'm trying to do is set up a green industrial revolution. So we can, the main carbon emitters in the UK are the construction industry, power, and transport. We can use hemp to replace that and make it a green economy.
Awesome.
Guy Coxall, so we're going to be hearing much more. He's going to open up a lot more. Did you know that hemp can actually be power, could create power and batteries? It's crazy, right? Okay, so we're moving on now to Niels Caulfield, who is an expert on regenerative agriculture. So we've got regen culture in Extinction Rebellion. Oh, by the way, XR, you do know what that is? Do you know what it is? No, seriously, it's nothing to do with the rebellion or anything like that. No, it's basically a retirement home for pirates. Arr, not anymore. Okay, so agriculture obviously is going to have to change. Okay, and how we have local communities working together, you know, and everyone's going to be farmers, aren't they, really, in some way or another. So we now got Niels Caulfield, who's an expert on regenerative agriculture. Over to you, Niels.
All right then. Morning, everybody. How are we feeling? Me too. Yeah, I was hoping this was going to be later in the day, but there we go. So basically what I'm going to talk to you about, or kind of try to represent today, is the sort of different farming systems that operate in the UK, their various kind of strengths and weaknesses, what kind of movements of change there are within those different sectors, if you like, and, you know, try and answer questions about that. So maybe bring some transparency to that. But I think probably the first thing to do is to talk about the kind of central premise and why land use and farming is so central to XR and to climate. And that's basically that land can either be a carbon source or a carbon sink. It should be a carbon sink, and it's probably one of the largest, well, certainly the soil and the terrestrial ecosystem is the largest carbon sink that we have. But due to our management over the last sort of 1,000 years, and then more recently, you know, it's thought that something between sort of 10 and 30% of all the anthropogenic atmospheric carbon originates from some kind of land, particularly soil. So basically, land use and land use change and agriculture are thought to be responsible for a significant proportion of that atmospheric carbon. So I guess the sort of central idea is then, well, we can put that carbon back ultimately, and by doing that we will ultimately grow better, healthier crops, and the soil and the land will be more resilient. And one of the main reasons or ways that it will be more resilient is that the water cycle, or our hydrology, is entirely dependent on soil and the carbon in soil. Basically, when soil has carbon in it, the organic matter we all think about, it becomes much more absorbent. So the water that we drink, all of the water that we drink should have been filtered through the kind of skin of the earth, if you like, the soil. And all the water that should be in rivers and watercourses should have made its way through soil and then sort of filtered out. However, due to our management practices, that sort of phenomena has been somewhat broken, basically. So when it rains heavily, which it does, and we have more extreme weather events, the water that should be infiltrating is just running off. So you get like these big flood pulses, and then a lot of dry land, basically. So you can kind of think of the UK as a bit of a sort of wet desert, if you like. We don't have a shortage of rainfall, but we do have a shortage of infiltration. Hence, last year, you know, we had 6 weeks without rain and the entire farming system ground to a halt. We call it drought, and the rest of the world laughs at us, basically. But it shows how sort of precarious the system is, basically. So I guess kind of things we would also talk about would be sort of direct emissions from agriculture, so methane, nitrous oxide, as well as other sources. So I guess we're going to talk briefly on the who and the how, but the who obviously is farmers and growers, but it's also consumers. So, you know, obviously we're going to address the issues of consumer choice and buying choices, and kind of, you know, there's definitely strength in how you use your dollar, if you like, but that only sort of goes so far, if you like, and ultimately I think that you know, there's through the sort of I'm trying to think, the discourse of like plant-based diet, for example, that has definitely approached farming through a kind of adversarial approach, and I think that there's just a bit of a separation, basically, between sort of concerned consumers, if you like, people that want to access sustainable food, for example, and then those that actually produce it. And the farming community is a very kind of like close-knit and conservative community, very risk-averse community for multiple reasons, basically. It's also a community that has sort of high suicide rates and endemic issues with mental health. So, I kind of sort of, I guess, I'm proposing sort of, you know, two things. One, to understand that, like, ultimately going forward, the existing farming community are going to be producing the lion's share of our food for the number of years to go. You know, obviously, there's an argument for all of you becoming more directly involved going to work on farms, for example, starting farm businesses, starting buying cooperatives, you know, actually making direct sort of commercial links with farmers and bringing resilience and capacity into the food system, if you like. But ultimately, the majority of the food is going to be grown by the existing farmers that are out there. So we've got to make friends with them ultimately. And a lot of that is about starting where they're at, basically. And I guess one thing that's worth saying is that there is a new, very just emergent XR group called XR Farmers. They had their inaugural meeting this Friday, so day before yesterday. It was small, but and there's definitely talk of pink tractors in October. So there you go. How long have I got?
Another minute. That's great what you're saying.
Okay, great.
You want a pink tractor right now?
Yeah. So I guess that, you know, the other half of it is to talk about the sort of how, if you like, and that's kind of the area that I focus on, you know, sort of the technical delivery of that. So, you know, definitely happy to talk about or answer questions about regenerative agriculture or carbon farming, organics, vegan organics, agroforestry, for example, and also to talk about the sort of the contemporary contemporary farming practices and their issues with that, if you like. Whether it be arable land, you know, the production of cereals, for example, and how destructive both vegetable production and cereal production is. And that's where the sort of majority of the soil degradation and the sort of ecosystem destruction comes from. Obviously, there's issues with grain feeding, so the feeding of grains or other cereal products that we could potentially be eating, and also the rising trend for arable products to be directed to anaerobic digesters. So, you know, again, there's a lot of demands on our food, if you like, and obviously then issues with or concerns with grassland and how we manage our grasses here in the UK. And, you know, I guess the sort of idea of bringing best practice into grassland management, as well as kind of incorporating more trees and agroforestry into what are otherwise quite homogeneous landscapes. Then obviously sort of horticulture and vegetable productions being one of our kind of like central sort of food sources, if you like, and definitely a very efficient way to produce food. But there's a lot of barriers there, sort of high labour costs, for example, endemic use of migrant labour, for example, both in vegetable and fruit production. And if you want sort of really good example of how that is sort of destructive, you can look at Almeria in southern Spain, where a significant proportion of the UK's out of season vegetables come from, and we basically have North African migrants living in cardboard shacks inside polytunnels, with no rights and very little financial remuneration. So obviously then forestry is another part of that, and I think that's ultimately what I'm kind of proposing for us, sort of to reimagine land and farming, is to create a sort of mosaic landscape and a synthesis of different land use types. So integrating forestry through agroforestry. So I guess that, you know, every sort of farm in the UK could have maybe another 10 to 20% tree cover and not lose any sort of production, inverted commas. So yeah, I guess I wanted to talk about sort of otherwise the sort of the movements that are sort of upwelling. So we have conservation agriculture in the arable sector. So that's basically sort of no-till conventional production, and the sort of rise of the soil health movement from the States, and that's bringing some very interesting results. There are groups like the Farm Carbon Cutting Toolkit, which now have a Soil Farmer of the Year award, and that's awarded to 2 or 3 farmers every year. In the sort of grass sector, there's the Pasture Fed Livestock Association, which is certifying 100% grass-fed meat. And then sort of ultimately we have this idea of sort of regenerative agriculture, and that's a framework that I work with, and I basically consult and educate farmers using that framework and get them to adopt ultimately novel practices that will draw down carbon, sort out the water system, and if done right, bring better sort of bottom line, ultimately more profitable at the end of the day. So there we go.
That's Neil Schoolfield. So, everyone okay? Yeah, good. So that's the line of the day so far, okay? There is talk of pink tractors in October so far. Early in the day, who knows what other lines we're going to get. So you get the picture. So these kinds of, there are obviously, you might call these solutions, but they're just different ways of us living with each other and with our resources that mean that we can face climate breakdown and perchance be resilient. And there's two ways of doing it. So these kinds of things would be much easier to happen if people were in power with just ordinary people from the grassroots who knew what we need to do. There was no corporations in the way. There's no revolving bloody door or, your father-in-law is Lord Howell or something like that. So that's how these things link, you see. When people like us are in power, then these kinds of things can be happening. And as you know, with the third demand in Extinction Rebellion, we're putting everything on citizens' assemblies. That means ordinary people chosen at random making decisions, okay? So what happens if you start having those kinds of people already getting positions of power? And that's where things get really interesting. So the first question I'm going to ask you guys is this. There are obstacles, so we'd be interested in finding out just maybe 2 or 3 of the obstacles that you have in what you're doing and how you perhaps have been able to get around them. Does that sound okay for you guys? Yeah? All right. Are you okay with that, Kay? Because we haven't known from a while. Yeah. You ready for it?
Let someone else go first.
Yeah, sure. Pete, you're good on you've had a load of obstacles. He's good on obstacles.
I don't know if I am, actually. Obstacles. This is one of Kay's, actually. Sorry. It's like... No, okay. No, I won't pinch, Kay. No. It's... Well, the obstacles are the status quo. Obviously, that we live in a system... It's turkeys and Christmas, with apologies to vegans. It's like... It's trying to change a system when the system above us is so set in its way, and particularly from at the national level, we have a party system, and it's not going to want to let go. I mean, there was that little brief moment when some form of proportional representation might have happened when the Lib Dems cuddled up to the Tories, and it was squashed so brutally. And that was it was only a tiny little change anyway. So these things are really difficult to do. But what Jamie just said is what links me. I mean, this is in a sense I'm answering the problem, I suppose. I think that the citizens' assemblies and people's assemblies are have to be the way out, and that's what we need to be doing more of, is engaging, is reclaiming politics, is doing it. I mean, which is what we're doing, sitting around here on a Sunday morning talking about these things, really. This is what we are doing, is talking about what matters. And as more large groups start to do that, then it sidelines the thing which is so difficult to get rid of. It's really hard for a lot of the councils who are in minority situations. It's really hard getting rid of the old people who've been there forever and higher up. And the ones who are in, I mean, we watch as I said, the complete and utter nonsense of what's happening in Westminster, and we've got no say in it at all. So I think what we have to do is to find ways to do it in parallel and try and get a moral authority. And if the moral authority is linked to the pink tractor rebel cause, then those two together, the carrot and stick, is maybe a way out. So I don't know if that's what you wanted, because I've then answered my problem. But there you go. Where are we going now?
How was that for you?
So I've just jotted down a couple of things that I've had struggles with, and in all honesty, the first one was confidence and feeling that it's okay for me to be there on the town council, and the ways I've got over that is with the wonderful group that I've got around me, which is Torridge Common Ground, and just being honest about how I'm feeling and literally just holding my head up and going, yes, I am here. I got the most votes in our ward, the only female, and we did push someone out who'd been there for 12 years. So actually, I am going to be a bit cocky, And the second thing, the other issue is like, how do we show people a different way? And like with the job that I do, I can't tell you enough how important the little things are. So just like when I'm working with homeless people, is taking them a hot drink, or, you know, asking them if they want to go and have a coffee with you in a cafe, because actually, you know, they don't get that very often because apparently they're second-class citizens and they're not. So with the council stuff, I've been starting with the little things. So me and Councillor Carl Hawkins is over there. There he is. In the last month, we did 2 events at our local pannier market because we were in the market committee meeting, and it was just obvious that the traders their morale was so low and they felt that no one cared. So we set up 2 events. I was a mermaid and he was a pirate. And we brought a few more customers in for them. So yeah, it's the little things, and then you work up. So it's just showing people that you are seeing them and that you are hearing them.
Oh, do you want to go next? Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, the cannabis industry has lots of issues and problems, but one of the main one is people's perception of it, and education is really the key. You know, lots of people think cannabis is a dangerous drug or a gateway drug. It's not. The skunk variety can cause mental health problems, and that's mainly what's available on the black market. But the natural plant, where it has good levels of CBD in, which is antipsychotic and anti-anxiety, it's impossible to get psychosis from. And hemp is non-psychoactive altogether. So educating people not just on the medicinal benefits, but also all the different uses as well, is really important. That gets people, and people are power. We also need to change government views, you know, especially hemp being banned. You know, farmers in Europe are making up to €33,000 a hectare for the CBD industry. It's you know, it's worth about $500 million at the moment in Europe. And you know, farmers here losing subsidies, they need a cash crop, and they're having to destroy the most profitable part of the plant, which is ridiculous. So we need to, luckily, politicians like to be popular. So if we look at, you know, the climate crisis and Brexit and farmers and helping the soil and growing organically, you know, that can get them more votes. So we need to, in March next year, the UN are going to be voting on the recommendations of the World Health Organization, which will reclassify cannabis from a Schedule 1 drug, but it will also remove hemp from any drug scheduling. So that will become international law. I'm going to be in Vienna at the UN vote next March. And if that goes through okay, then I'm going to be lobbying the Home Office to adopt it as soon as possible, hopefully by next planting season, and just remove the licensing altogether. It's a medicinal herb, you know. Thanks. The other issue is the infrastructure. We haven't got the infrastructure at the moment. We need harvesting equipment because a normal combine won't work. The fibres are too strong and they can wrap around the machinery. So we're looking at setting up cooperatives. So if you've got so many farmers in an area, they can all put into the machinery so that it can be shared around. And we're also looking at putting decortication plants around the UK so the straw doesn't have to be taken any distance, and that the decortication basically separates the outer fibre from the shiv, and that then that can go into end uses, and this can create a whole industry. It can create jobs, and it's just yeah, it's just convincing people. Really, education is key.
Yeah, I guess probably my main insight would be that, like, farming as a problem, if you like, the farming problem is probably one of the most complex problems, or the most complex jobs, ultimately. The number of different sort of competing considerations, climate, sale prices, machinery, seed sourcing, you know, all these different things, you know, it really adds up to something that is quite challenging, basically. And when you add to that the incredibly low price of food, you basically have a recipe for people closing down. Ultimately, you know, they don't have space in their mind to consider sort of experimentation or adopting novel practices, ultimately. So that's the sort of crux of my work, ultimately, is to offer novel practices and offer ways that they can incorporate them at a small scale or incrementally without it basically sort of threatening the overall resilience of their existing business, their farming model, if you like. And I think one of the things I have to do, when I would sort of keep reminding myself when I come to meet these people, that I'm meeting an individual, basically, that they're typically, and this is another thing about farming, they're basically all family businesses, They live and work on the land, and they're incredibly attached to all that goes on there, basically. And I'm some random person that's come along with these grand ideas, basically. And you have to sort of park quite a lot of that, if you like, and just sort of meet them where they're at and offer them some sort of simple tools, simple things that they can do, basically. And one of the ways that we do that is to offer them some ways to observe their soil, for example. So using the soil health principles, and the first thing to do is to basically get a spade out, for example, and look at the soil and learn to interpret what the soil is telling you, basically, whether it's healthy or not. I mean, generally speaking, it's all terrible, that's across the board, if you like, with the worst being horticulture and arable. If you want to find the worst soil, just go to the nearest cereal crop and take a spade out. And if you can get the spade in, great. So, often it's quite a sort of, a gloomy picture that you kind of paint to people. And this is one of the things as well. You don't want to lay it on too thick about how many bad things they've been doing for the last 20, 30 years, if you like. So I guess that maybe it's also worth saying that most of the people I actually work with directly are already sort of on the path. There's no sort of cold selling. There are already people that are interested. They've learned some stuff on YouTube, for example, or on Twitter. And I would say that social media is revolutionising the farming industry, because there is now the opportunity for farmer-to-farmer exchange of knowledge and all the rest of it. And people are interested, they're willing to change. It's on the Archers, for example. All this stuff is on the Archers. And, back in the 50s when it was first conceived, it's a propaganda tool for extending best practice in farming, yeah? And we're now that's being a bit reclaimed, if you like. So people are aware of soil health, they're aware of conservation agriculture, they're aware of sort of pasture fed, for example, but they don't really know how to do it. That's the sort of stumbling block, if you like. So this is where people like me, for example, and there need to be more people like me come in, basically, to sort of gently sort of offer, nudge, and support, ultimately. That's probably the primary role that anyone can take, is to support your local farmer, basically. So there you go.
Everyone okay? Good. Yes?
Yeah. Are you, this might be a silly question, but are you going into the agricultural colleges?
Are you going into the agricultural colleges, Niels? Do you want to quickly answer that? We'll do Q&A a bit later, but answer that then, Niels.
Yes. I got my first, what's it called, guest lecturer spot at the Royal Agricultural University, formerly RAC, Cirencester. So that was a bit of a win. But yeah, a bit is the answer to your question.
Okay, I've got a really difficult question for you guys. So what I'm going to do is give you the question, and then I'll tell a little story while you work out what the hell you're going to say, okay? So what this is let's say it all turns out all right. Let's say it all turns out all right, okay? What does that look like? If Torridge Common Ground goes the full way and does what you dream it can do, what does that look like? If it goes the full way, Frome is very far ahead, but what does it look like if it turns out all right? If this endeavour to have real power held truly by the community, what does that look like in, say, 5 years' time? Okay, as a resilient community. And the same to you guys. What does it look like if hemp really does work out? What is it going to bring to this community? How's it going to help this country be resilient? And the same with the great work that you're doing, Niels. So while they chew that over, I'll tell you a story, right? It's a really good story, so try not to listen, because you're meant to be thinking. No, it's this really sticks for me, right? So we started off Torridge Common Ground down here a year ago, about 14 months ago now, right? And it just literally started with a talk that I gave in the local town, Bideford, and in fact Carl Hawkins, who was there, he was only there to film it, and now he's a bloody councillor. Isn't that amazing? Anyway, so we had loads of meetings with the community. It's all about listening. Everything's about listening. I'm a complete doolally fan of citizens' assembly, people's assemblies, of participatory democracy, of all of us listening to each other fairly and equally with no one dominating the conversation. Okay, I'm a big fan of that, like crazy fan. I saw it happen in front of my eyes in Occupy London day after day with these huge assemblies. When someone takes the mic, right, in front of 2,000 people, and they take the mic and they start by going, I've never done anything like this before, but I feel compelled to say this. The air cracks, man, because then you've got people with no agency having agency, and that's the bomb, I'm telling you now. So we had this meeting here, right? Luckily, we were able to use some places in Tapley. We had a big meeting for the community, and what we'd done by now is it's quite further down the line with Torridge Common Ground. So we'd put on the wall our, what's it called, manifesto. And there was lots of the community there, quite a few people who hadn't come before. And I was going around and I was pointing at one bit. I was saying, look, this bit, right? This is like what it could be like. So I just, you know, what we got is a street with one lawnmower, because everyone shares the lawnmower. Not everyone with a bloody lawnmower. What's that about? So everyone's sharing their tools, you know. So everyone's sharing their tools, one lawnmower, okay? And everyone's growing food. Everyone's using their garden, their space to grow food, or some common land to grow food, and they share their food. And also there's the coffee mornings, you know, so maybe in the elderly person's house, and there's a coffee morning there once a week or twice a week where the community comes together. So just describing these things, right? And there's this elderly lady with her hand up really straight away. And we went to her, what's that? And through tears she said, you just described my childhood. And that was the greatest loss in my life. Within one generation, we've forgotten what it's like to live together. It was a beautiful moment. Look at me cracking up. But it was, and that was, if you want to capture this in just one story, it was that woman saying that. Because for me, this is a vision of like, okay, we're not going to be flying everywhere anymore. You know, we're going to have to change the way we're living, but it's pretty miserable, man. Okay? And actually, this simpler way, I mean, what do we value? You know, and what she was saying was, look, I remember Mr. Richardson next door. He did the bloody rhubarb. And my dad did the runner beans. And we would all play together out there. And there literally was one lawnmower, yeah? And Doris was the old lady at the end of the road. We were all there twice a week. She's lovely. She'd lost her husband years before. No one was lonely, you know, all this stuff. It wasn't someone like, you know, waxing lyrical. She was giving us her childhood memory. And she was saying it through tears because it had gone so quickly. You know, so there's a story to kind of get us emotionally wound into this next bit of the talk, and now we're going to slam it over to UK. You good yet?
Yeah, I'm done.
Cake off, ladies and gentlemen. Councillor Cake off.
Hiya. This is literally the dream list. So you said, how do you want it to be? This is how I want it to be. So basically, going back to what you said, and we spoke about the standing orders, which is the list of rules that you're meant to stick to at council meetings, get rid of them. The public being part of the whole meeting, which is like what you guys do at Frome. So I want to get to that. We want to get to that stage. I know that Carl does as well. And just getting more of the public involved, you know. Education to get rid of the smokescreen shit that turns people against each other, you know. So the stuff that we're seeing on a daily basis, you know, refugees and immigrants want to take our jobs and destroy us. Just moved our second Syrian family into Torridge, and they're amazing. You know, we need that diversity. I think really believe that that's how we build resilient communities. And in general, the community being more self-sufficient, having community hubs, using our empty buildings, more freedom for our kids, caring for our vulnerable within our community, and literally building things together. So houses, parks, stuff like that, and getting the hemp guy involved as well to help us do things. So yeah, that's my dream list.
That's lovely, I haven't got much to add to those two stories because whoa, you know, that's the world we want to live in. I think there's a bit I'd also want to add around that being joined up, the local and global, which has always been really important to me. Frome was a very early fair trade town. But that whole thing. Well, like you said about the refugees, Frome very early on had refugee families who've come in and making sure that we don't create these, not utopias, are they? But it's kind of making absolutely sure that it's really joined up, because everything's gonna have to be joined up when climate change starts hitting a fan, much more than perhaps it is now. And just like you were saying, that sort of going back, there was a family who said to me earlier on, they were in a very disappointed voice. It's like, we were going to go away this summer, but we can't because there's so much happening in Frome. And you think, yes, because it's like that's what I want. I want to live in a community where there is so much going on that why would you go away? It's like, oh God, I'm so exhausted. There's so much happening.
That's fantastic. You okay, guys? Brilliant.
The prohibition of cannabis has caused mass genocide and mass ecocide over the years. Every mammal has an endocannabinoid system that we're born with. In fact, there's cannabinoids in breast milk of every mammal. We're meant to be with this plant. And it's also great for the soil, and it's great for all sorts of things. So the best case scenario would be the full decriminalisation of cannabis, because that takes it out the hands of the big pharmaceutical companies, and it means people can self-medicate with this medicinal herb. There's a law case going on at the moment to decriminalise it so people can grow their own. And also growing hemp in your garden, and you can use it for so many different things. So really, what I'd like to see, if everything goes well, and in 5 years, we've got a vibrant hemp industry. There's a project that I'm involved in with one of my colleagues. Some of you might know Julian Thompson. He's doing a project in the northeast of England where we're building 700 hempcrete houses, which are all carbon negative. And we're also looking at powering it with hemp, having permaculture designs with agroforestry systems and wiki farms. It's going to be a community land trust in perpetuity, so it's going to be a really affordable, off-grid, sustainable housing. And we can even heat those homes. With hempcrete, you save about 40% on the heating bills over the lifetime of the building. And when you process hemp, you get about 11 to 15% waste, which is mainly dust and just little bits that aren't really usable. This can be pressed into these, which are hemp logs, really. They burn, you get a flame time of about an hour and a half, and about another half hour of burn after that. So it's better than oak, really. So if we can use that waste product to heat those homes as well, I mean, how off-grid and how carbon negative is that?
I guess we're sort of presenting a bit of a vision of the future. I think that ultimately what I would like to see, if you could boil it down to one thing, would be a totally stress-free food system. So, for example, when you go to the shop and you're there in front of the veg counter, you haven't got to be like agonising about, oh, should I buy this? I should be buying organic, but I can't really afford it. It's kind of like all these kind of like questions and guilt trips. What you want is just go to the shop and everything's ethically sourced, everything's sustainably produced. You can just buy whatever you want, basically, Just do away with all that, basically. And then the other thing it would be for the producers as well, so they're not like doing 80-hour weeks for no money and no kind of like, basically farmers are literally busting a gut to bring food to our table, and they get very, very little recognition for it, basically, So it would be good for them to feel genuinely proud of their sort of practices, and us to feel proud of the way that they do it, if you like. Obviously there's going to be massive change that there need to be, we're not just sort of like just start celebrating business as usual. So within this kind of like reinvented sort of landscape where we see a lot more trees, for example, we see like a lot more diversity in the landscape, a lot more sort of rewilded areas, for example, a lot more kind of like intensive production in cities and around cities, for example. But basically, I think that's the sort of the ultimate thing. It's like, we've adopted best practice across all realms, all sectors, and it's a nice place, it's a nice job to have, basically, and all the food that comes out of it tastes good, it's nutrient dense, and it's affordable, basically.
Okay, we've just over an hour in, right? So that's loads from us. turn to someone next to you and discuss what you think would be a great, resilient future. 5 years in the future, it's turned out we're resilient. So discuss that, just 5 minutes, and then some of you are going to come up and tell us what you're talking about, okay? Is that okay? Yeah? Go on it. Take my word, everyone's friendly. Sort of wind down the conversations, because it'd be really nice to hear what some of the people have been speaking about. So is it okay if we kind of sort of come back in the room, if that makes sense, that phrase? Wouldn't that be tragic if we said, right, everyone turn to someone and talk about your positive future, and there's like, silence in the room. Quite the opposite. So, in amongst, and look, let's get the right perspective here. It's not like everything's going to be fine. Extinction Rebellion, it's a very good reason that grief is right in the middle of Extinction Rebellion, because it's real. Climate breakdown is real. The whole thing about, tell the truth. The truth still isn't really being absorbed by the mass world at all. And grief is there because we have to deal with the bloody science every day. I'm one of the spokespeople for Extinction Rebellion. So that means I've got to, keep up to date with the science. It's horrible. It's awful to go on and, know what we're looking at. So this is not like, everything's going to be fine. It's not. It's going to be really, really hard work, but we're really here, and we're in the movement that can do stuff like this. I've never seen any like this, personally, myself at all. And so what this is, just to kind of keep the right perspective, is climate breakdown is definitely going to happen. We're not going to stop that, okay? All right, the rebellion is crucial because we have to change the system that's taken us to this awful place, this embarrassing place, because I'm embarrassed. This species is exquisite. And look at what we're doing. It's just shameful. The fact is, right, it's like, what are we playing, Gail? Well, it's like, at the moment we are sitting in front of a violin and we're banging on it with a spoon, yeah? We can pick it up and play it, okay? And that's really important about all this. So it's not all going to be fantastic and we don't have to worry. We are going to have to dedicate our lives to this. But there are ways of looking at a future where we are surviving, where we are resilient, and there'll be a lot of stuff that's good about it. That's all this is. Are you with me on that? Yeah? All right, cool. So what would be really good is, just anyone who's in a group just then, come up or a pair, just take the mic. Tell us what you guys were just talking about. 2 minutes max. Come on up and tell us what you were just talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Lord Toad!
Hi guys. Well, XR reminds me of an old joke. There's a huge poster, in this case with fire and brimstone. And it says, "The meek shall inherit the earth." Massive letters, "The meek shall inherit the earth." And at the bottom in tiny letters, "If that's okay by you." Right, so that's us. I totally get that. And I was at Bylines and I managed to worm my own stage. And I'd given Steve, I was hanging out with Steve, and he's apparently the owner. I didn't know that. We were just hanging out because we were old guys, right? And we made this jacket for him with the Extinction Rebellion. And I managed to get little kids here, and I was carrying a polar bear and everything. A bit odd. But it's because I love animals, that's why I'm here. This mic's a bit low. So what I'm trying to say is get up and be counted, because the meek shall inherit the earth, if that's all right by you. But it's not all right by us now. You've got to turn that anger, sadness, and this is my third one I've forgotten, but it's kind of just like rabbit in the headlights thing. A lot of us are still very too meek. And it's like we're sitting in the coach going towards the cliff and we're not standing up and being counted. So we're meek people. And like last night, they said, "Oh, have you got a story about XR protest?" I do, but I can't remember it. And this morning I thought, I could have just said that. It's just my little story about jumping around on the testicles of a horse outside in the reclaimed streets. So I'll share it now, right? And this guy, me and Bruce were like, we climbed up underneath the testicles of this brass horse, and thinking we were like totally cool because no one else could climb up there. And then this man in a pink dress, like a crimpling queen, right? But he wasn't a queen until he's like totally Saxon warrior, great big beard, spark plug through his nose. He climbs up to the very top of the horse, which we thought was impossible. So we're looking at the bull's testicles, we're looking at his testicles, we're like, okay, right, have some of that. Meanwhile, someone was putting some turf on Churchill's head. But what I'm saying is, get up there, get counted, turn your sadness into action, and don't be so bloody meek anymore, because it's not all right by us, okay? Thank you. Bless you all.
Okay, anyone who was having a chat, please come up and feedback what the chat was about. I'd really appreciate it. We'd all really appreciate it. Anyone? Come on. Are you going to start? No? Okay. This lovely gentleman here, Councillor Shane Collins.
So, first question, what is the most efficient use of land? How can you get the most food out of a square metre of land? Allotments, I reckon. Allotments. You get the most food out of a square metre of land from allotment or as a tree or a walnut tree. So just chatting to Toby here, who has just done what I was really wanting to try and get going, of allowing better access to the land to small holdings. Okay, I'm a district councillor on Mendip. We've just passed a climate ecological emergency motion. One of the things we want to put into effect is essentially an agricultural workers policy. So to allow people to buy the land at agricultural prices and then put on low development housing. It's what the Ecological Land Co-op do. They buy big farms, split it up so that people have got their own small holding area and then access to communal orchards or grazing or whatever it is. But I want Mendip to buy up the land and then essentially either rent it out to tenant smallholders or assist tenant smallholders if they can afford to buy it, to then put up a low impact development housing. That way we get food grown locally, because we all know, we're importing, 40-50% of our food. We can't depend on doing that. We can't depend on importing food from other parts of the world which are going to be food unstable themselves. It's silly to think that hungry people are going to let their food go be exported to over here. So we've got to be more locally food and energy resilient.
And I just wanted to say something very quickly to add to that. So, while Frome was waiting for Mendip, but Mendip's a district above us to, when they were faffing about, we bought a field and created 100 allotments and got rid of the waiting list. So, get in locally and just do it. Yeah, we can have that one.
Hi, I'm also from Frome. I feel really, really drawn to this side of the argument because when I went over this morning to the kitchen garden, I thought this is utter bliss. There's food, there's loveliness, there's beauty, there's peace. It's ours, it's earthy, And I was thinking whether it would be possible to go around my neighborhood and knock on doors, and I don't quite know how to say it, to say, are you aware that thing, or where you're standing with looking into the future when food and when it might get difficult. I have got the garden with 3 apple trees. What have you got? What can we get together and talk about it? We have got a brilliant veg box scheme on the edge of our town, and I was thinking it's one veg box scheme. I don't know how land accessibility is, because of course we want to grow, but we need to have the people there who have land to grow it on, to see where more, there's the allotments, but I think my draw is to reach into my local neighborhood and in what you said also. Thank you.
So I'd like to see I'd like to see information more readily collated and available. So I used to be a scientist. About 5 years ago, I decided no one's listening. Gave up that career, bought some land, fought for planning, managed to get on the land. I've planted a forest garden, planted 2,000 trees, some woodland. I'm doing all sorts of stuff that I think is regenerative. And now that everybody's talking about regenerative agriculture, I thought, okay, there must be some things that I'm missing here. So I Google it, and it's just a buzzword. There's no, why doesn't XR have, here's some advice of things that you can do. Here's advice of things that you can do outside of agriculture as well. If collapse is coming, yeah. Anyway.
Can I have a woman speaking next? Thank you.
I come from the Forest of Dean, and we have there a marvellous food distribution system. called a Forest Food Hub, or called a Food Hub, which is in other areas, but it's working pretty well in the forest. This is largely run by volunteers. It's much more than the veg box scheme. We actually have farmers now doing it through it, offering veg box. I think we got 2 or 3 veg box schemes going through it. But we cover most things that you buy. And it's run by volunteers with a few people paid very low wages, run by a cooperative. We done online, which may not be possible after everything crashes. But you order from an amazing list of things. And a lot of it has come from local suppliers. A lot of it is organic, though much of it isn't actually registered organic, because that's very, very expensive. But most of it is organic. Beautifully homemade cakes, chutneys, jams, cosmetics. I can never remember the whole bloody list. I mean, it's nearly everything. It's packed by volunteers. You order online. It's packed by volunteers. You collect the box from a local person, and it really encourages a number of people have come into local production. It really encourages small vegetable growers, small farmers. That whole area is blossoming locally. And I mean, farmers' markets are great if you've got a big place, but if you're in the country, they don't work so well because you don't get enough people. But I think we have far bigger list there than you get on most farmers' markets. Far bigger list, including organic stuff from abroad and so on, hard stuff. Go Forest Food Hub. Go and look it up and see if you can get it going locally. All done by volunteers.
There were just 2 of us talking, and really we weren't looking at a very resilient future because we both said we don't know what it would look like, and I think that comes from where we're both at. And the person I was talking with said, so many people, do you mind me? So many people that she meets in her everyday job are just really, really stressed. She's an osteopath, and they probably don't have the space to kind of think about these things because of their daily lives. I was despairing about how so many people I've worked with and so many people I meet and see on the bus seem to be more interested in, and I'm not being arrogant here, but, you know, it fit, like, slotted into Love Island and consumerism. So, and also people who I know locally who, like, really grow vegetables and stuff like that, because I live in a little village, kind of are quite angry with XR because of our approach to farming. So trying to now, I thought we probably both need to move forward from our discussion and think, well, maybe what we could do, and this isn't the bit we got a chance to discuss, maybe what we could do is, like, have small goals. So, and taking from the expert panels here, like my small goal with my local friends who are, you know, from the farming community, is to try and to introduce some of the stuff that you guys are talking about, really. And maybe, you know, you can find ways as well to kind of work with things that are going on near you. Because I'm really good friends with these farming people. We vote completely differently. They tend to be more Tory than me. But they are realising, some of them, what we're doing to the earth and that we need to do something. But they're kind of saying, but what about our livelihood, you know? So thank you, everybody, because your kind of contributions have maybe can feed into us too, which we didn't really get to our resilience bit, did we? Thank you.
Hey!
Hi, I'm Suzanne. I'm from Malvern, and I'm a teacher. I teach at university now. I teach teachers to be teachers. And it's a system that we're training our teachers to go and destroy the souls of our children. And it really sucks. It really sucks. And it's very hard for us in university because we have to prepare teachers to go into this environment and do not what attracted them to teaching and try to teach them how to, in between the straitjacket that we've put on education, try to nurture our children. And so I think our resilient future really has to begin with reclaiming education, with reclaiming childhood, with bringing back playfulness and curiosity, and a sense that education is preparing you for life, not just to take exams. So I have this vision of this world where children are integrated with everything and learning, and that we value that beautiful childhood time where everything that they're learning is part of their real life and is contextualized. So that's what we need to work towards. Thank you.
I'm a secondary school teacher, and that's absolutely true. It is a straitjacket. That's amazing. Thanks so much for that. We're going to move into the next last section, okay? The last lap. So we're going to go back to this panel, and what you guys are going to be talking about. Oh, I don't need to do that now. So what we're asking the panel on this last bit is this. Here is an audience that clearly you lot are really, this has gone quite well. We've never done this before, Rebellion to Resilience, and actually this is a really interesting thing to turn up, and people are actually really engaged in it. So what I'd like to know from this panel is, how can we go away and start to support what you're doing as individuals or as a group, or actually to build it ourselves? What would your advice be? I know you're great at this, Kay, because the one thing with Kay is that it's really important that Torridge Common Ground allows more people to realise, oh, I can do that. Because it's when people with no agency get agency, they are the bomb, okay? And so one of the things is like, you know, how do we encourage more people to get involved in it? So what I'm asking you for is, you know, what are you going to tell us to do to go away and do? What can we go away and do that supports or is involved in the great work that you lot are doing? Is that all right? Yeah? Are you ready? You look really ready for it already. Bloody hell. On your marks, get set, go! Take off!
So, go to your town council meetings, look at the committee meetings. Public can go to any council or committee meetings, start to get a feel of it, start to get used to the lingo, how it's set out, because that's one thing that I regret not doing. I went to a few, but not enough. And like then the first meetings I started going to, I kept putting my hand up in the wrong places to vote, and it was getting all confusing, which is fine, I've learned. The other thing is, look in the mirror, right? Seriously, look in the mirror and look at each other and stand. You know, get together. And if you're not confident to stand, or your friend or your neighbour isn't confident to stand, get them to support you. Because, you know, in 4 years' time, we've got the next election. So I was elected in May. And I'm grooming people right now to stand with us. I'm going to, I've got to turn that word into a positive. But I am, and I'm identifying people, and I'm going, you can do this, you will do this, because we need to do this. So that when we all stand next time, I want us to get in a position like Frome, where the independents are the majority, and that's what I'm asking you guys to do. Go out there, campaign, get in, and get a majority. Because all of you can stand, and you better, because I'll find out.
Brilliant.
It's very, very loud at the front, so I don't know if anyone's like.
It's very loud at the front.
Seriously loud.
Oh,
Okay.
Sorry, yeah, I'm a deaf old punk. I don't know who's ending.
I'll
Can we
talk.
turn it down a little bit so we don't punk rock it up?
It's gone down, and I'll be more gentle anyway. Thank you.
Better?
Well, that sounds better from me. Yeah. No, you did. Yeah. Thanks. They did turn it down too.
Ladies and gentlemen, the
Yeah.
sound engineers have been brilliant. The sound of this show has been amazing, by the way. The sound last night was fantastic. Revolution!
And responsive too. I forgot what I was going to say now. Actually, what I was going to say was two things. One is that in 60% of town and parish councils, there are no elections. In Dorset last year, there was some staggering number. There were 220-something places that didn't have elections at all. And 20 there were 20 where there were no candidates. So the council just ceases to exist, and they combine it together. So it's there for the taking. And the reason why it might be useful to do is, in relation to XR, is I've been doing quite a lot of work with XR around these climate and ecological emergency declarations, which I think are an incredibly important thing to do. And next week there'll be a new guidance on ways to do that, which hopefully will be much more plain English and much easier to follow. So how to encourage councils to do that. And then the next bit, which is how to make sure that they work and to push, because it's a really interesting and useful a thing in there of carrot and stick, whereby we can be trying to make these things happen with compliant and helpful councils, and then XR also has, I shouldn't say it has a stick, because of course it's non-violent, isn't it? How can you have a non-violent stick? A sort of gentle sort of waving, anyway, you know what I mean? that we can apply pressure, you know. Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. Beat your non-compliant councillor with hemp.
Okay, I'll quickly. Oh no, I forgot what I was going to say anyway. Actually, what was it? Oh yeah. XR. It's really worth supporting, because you know if one piece of advice is it's about. It's going in every direction at the same time. We're in 63 countries. There's 110,000 people signed up. It's not even 11 months old. And what I'm trying to draw attention to is tell everyone about it, because it's not like a sort of bunch of froth-mouthed lefty activists. I mean, look, I cannot see one fleck of froth in this room. You know what I'm saying? That's what's confounding. That's what's confounding the media, for example. You know. And so as much as possible to continue to draw people in and get them involved and share our skills. You know, it's an incredible situation to have so many people working together. You only have to say, can anyone, and already 10 people are going, oh, I do that, or I've got one of them, I've got a samovar. That has happened, see? Yeah, it has. So that's one of the main things that would be really, really great to kind of give as a piece of advice. Obviously, you're all into it, XR, because you're here, right? But it's about talking to people who are the least likely to be involved. It's about the people where you have your awkward conversations. And just listen. Don't judge. Don't ever judge. Just listen for a really, really long time to people. And the more difficult they are, the longer it's going to, you know, the more rejecting they are, there's a deep story there. So just listen for a hell of a long time. Our similarities could way outweigh our differences, and we're all in this together. So it's really important to do that kind of work. And it's great. Even if you're just totally rejected, it's fine. It doesn't matter, because you had an effect on an individual by listening to them without judging them, and that's huge. Okay. Anyway, that was my bit of advice. Over to Guy.
I'll stand up for this bit so the people at the back can see me and recognise me if you want to come and talk to me later about anything hemp cannabis based. So, I'm not selling though, but I do have CBD oil. So, a lot of councils, a lot of local authorities have now declared a climate emergency. If your local authority hasn't, get them to. But once they've declared that climate emergency, a lot of them don't really know what to do. What do we do next? Send them to Hemp Tank. You know, I can advise them on different things. If all of you join our Facebook group, we've got a Facebook group, just look for Hemp Tank. There's a video of a talk I did a couple of weeks ago, which really goes into depth of all the different uses of hemp. Pass that to your local council and get them to understand what hemp can do. It can help the local farmers, it can help with carbon negative housing and so on. And also, Hemp Tank is a non-profit think tank, and we rely completely on sponsorship from businesses and donations from the public. So if anybody can donate, please do. I've got a load of leaflets as well, so if anybody wants a leaflet directing you to the website and information, just come and see me. Yeah. Okay, so this is a supercapacitor battery made from hemp. So what it is basically is, you can just see the black bit there, that's hemp paper which is soaked in graphenized hemp. So it's basically a graphene process, graphenization process, which creates a similar thing to graphene, which has a huge surface area. In the middle, there's some hemp material, which is basically soaked in salt water, which works as an electrolyte. And then it's got your positive and negative. This is only one cell, so, you know. But when you put lots of cells together to make a battery, it's amazing. I mean, if you look at a 50 kilowatt hour off-grid system for a normal house, if you use lithium-ion battery bank, which obviously has to be mined and is unsustainable, it will do about 2,000 cycles before the battery's going down. This will do 100,000 cycles. And it's a fraction of the price, and it can be grown and manufactured here, which is one of the projects we're working on. So we can actually get rid of the national grid. Rather than trying to repair the national grid, which is already broken, because you lose about 2/3 of the energy in the grid, why don't we just have off-grid systems, mini grid systems for local towns and villages, all using this technology? You can also use the same technology, the graphene process, for solar panels as well. So that's going to be the next stage. So we can we can just power the whole country on hemp.
Can you buy them?
Not yet. We're still in development. It's going to be 2 to 5 years. Yeah. Not yet. We're setting up a manufacturing plant in the UK. We need to develop the pilot line to get it so it's all automated, and then build it up to having enough out there. But 2 to 5 years.
So remind me again. This is next steps. What you can do. What they can do. Yeah. Okay. I think that probably the advice that I would give would be try to make direct links with farmers and find ways to direct purchase food, basically. And probably one of those ways that you could do that to be set up a buying group where yourself and a number of people, your friends or neighbours, for example, buy sort of you bulk buy directly from a producer, and that would be ideal to do with an existing producer that's in your local area, for example. Or you could take that a little bit further, for example, potentially set up a CSA, a community supported agriculture project. So then basically you'd find a bit of land, basically existing bit of farmland, and see if they would rent your organisation a couple of acres, for example, and then you then go out and employ a grower to produce the food for you. And that's a really good resilient model. I'm not sure what else I would add to that, but yeah, the thing to do really is to make direct links with farmers and to buy direct, basically, because the more of the sort of the food pound that goes to the farmer rather than the middleman, the supermarkets and all the rest of it, the more capacity and the more breathing space they get, basically. And I think that with very few exceptions, all the farms in the UK could have like a sort of small horticulture block of, let's say, 2 to 5 acres, for example. And there's a whole sort of network of young, typically growers that are coming through organisations like the Land Workers Alliance, for example, who need land, they need accommodation, but they have skills, basically, and they're ready to go, basically. So if you can provide that support and that sort of guaranteed sort of income, for example, then there's a lot of opportunity there.
Thanks very much indeed. Okay, folks, we've got 15 minutes left, right? And I'm sure after listening to these amazing people chatting up on this panel, if anyone's got any questions that they'd like to ask, please ask them now. If you kind of put your little hand up. Yep, go on. Or come up and ask the question there. Is that okay? Yeah. Yeah, go on. Go for it. Yeah.
Hi, from Bristol. I had a question for you, Nils, about the setting up a CSA. Can you, feasibly, kind of, with a couple of acres, I'm coming from a place of no knowledge really. Can you sort of feasibly feed, I don't know, a street or a small community with this setup? How much could you rely on that as one provider, one source?
Yeah. Okay. I think probably the best thing to think of it is like a box. If you get a veg box, that provides a proportion of your weekly groceries, not all of it. Basically, it doesn't keep for a whole week, for example. So it's always going to be sort of a portion of what you're consuming. And the CSA model is nice, basically, because you just do a straight split of whatever's produced. Yeah, so everything that comes off the field, weekly harvests, is put into an area, and you either come and do your own boxing up for yourselves, which is even better for the grower, or the grower boxes it up, but you collect it. And however big or small it is, you divide that up amongst all the households, basically. So it's a scalable model ultimately. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there. Is that okay?
That's a good question. Can I grow hemp on my allotment, Guy?
Not at the moment. Currently, you can only grow hemp under a license from the Home Office, which costs £580 for 3 years. But as I said earlier, you know, we're hoping that the licensing will be changing or disappearing next year. What I would suggest that if it doesn't change and I don't achieve what I'm trying to achieve, then on your allotment, do some non-violent direct action and grow hemp. You're not going to get locked up for it because, you know, it's less than 0.2% THC. It's not like you're growing a drug.
Okay. I've got 3 questions over here, so I'm going to take this lady first.
Can you obtain the seeds for hemp? Yeah, I mean, there are places around Europe that sell. Hemp is, you have the EU Common Catalogue, which has 66 different varieties of hemp, which are all less than 0.2% THC, which makes it really difficult. But, you know, hopefully, if we get decriminalisation in the next year or 2, then we can grow any strain you want, and seeds are quite easy to get. And you have all sorts of different variations of CBD to THC levels. But, yeah, I mean, you can get through farmers the seed. You don't have to have a license to buy the seed. It's only actually growing the plant.
Can I have a question for the reclaiming the power through community side of the bench? Not that this isn't fantastic, but let's have some balancing. Yeah. Okay, that's a question for the whole panel, actually. What are your relations with the Green Party? Okay, so do you want to start with that? Yeah. I'm really interested to see what Kate's going to say to that.
I don't want to sound like a bitch. Unfortunately, we've got one Green Party member, haven't we, Carl, who happens to be our mayor. But unfortunately, I don't think he's a true Green. We have started challenging him on his decisions. But so at the minute, I'm not doing anything directly with the Green Party, but obviously it's definitely something that I would be up for. And I'm going to keep challenging our current Green member.
So our model says you can be a member of any party you like, so long as you you're sticking to the ways of working. So within Independence for Frome, there were people who were members of a whole range of different groups, and I don't even know 8 years later exactly what parties people were member of. Although I do know there were some Greens. And then, having said that, what happened in Frome was that the Green Party, the Green political party, said, we're not going to stand, because everything that you're doing is basically so green that we're going to concentrate at the next level, which is Shane, who's next to his level. And then some of us, including me, then as an individual gave our support. Because if you're just a group of individual people linked by an ethos, you can't decide things like there is no manifesto, there is no agreement to operate as a group in that way. If that makes any I'm sorry, that's a bit complicated. But we're basically anti-party if it's what guides you, if that ideology is what takes you in a direction. But on the other hand, we don't give a stuff, see what I mean? What group or anything else you're part of.
Thank you. As a think tank, we don't work with any particular party. We'll work with any party that will liberate this plant.
Yeah, not loads actually, formally, but one thing recently that is of note, Molly Scott-Cato, who's the MEP for Bristol and the South West. I don't know how big the sort of Southwest. Yeah, okay, it's a massive area. She recently called for like a kind of a round table, so meeting of farmers and other sort of like concerned individuals, basically. So I guess sort of watch this space, but it's a sort of a way to kind of basically build bridges between the Greens and sort of wider kind of farming community, basically. So I think that can only be good. And she's good. We love her. It's a shame she didn't get elected as the Bristol MP.
Thanks. Thank you, Niels. Folks, this has been... Oh, is it quick? Yeah, go for it.
A very quick thing on that. Conversely, you know, the Green Party has a body of experience for 30, 40 years now. Loads of the new independent councillors don't necessarily have that. But if you have a Green Party member within your group, you can sign up for the Association of Green Councillors emailing list and website. And, you know, there is a fantastic body of knowledge there. You just ask a question, and if it hasn't already been answered, it will be answered. So, you know, for people who are newer councillors, there is a huge body of wealth and information there that is open to use. You've just got to have somebody on your group who's a Green Party member who can access it.
Thanks. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to the end of this 2-hour marathon of mind-bending excitement, possibly inspiration, little drizzle of hope. And the most important thing is we're talking pink tractors for October. So, folks, thank you so much for the great involvement, the great questions, and really just to say at the end, thank you to Kay Corfe, Councillor Kay Corfe. Thank you to Pete McFadden. Thank you to Guy Coxall. Thank you to Niels Caulfield. So they are here, around and about. Grab them, pick their brains, take notes, swap contact details. Listen, the soundmen are brilliant. We said we love them. Let's say it again. There's only 7 stewards on duty at the moment. We need 20, 25. It's the big green tent there. Just go and join the stewards and show the love to the kitchen, show the love to each other. See you soon, ladies and gentlemen.